Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feed. No, and I've got no rhythm today. I'm going to review a book that has received a fair amount of praise, but it's also safe to say that opinion has been divided. I am not on the same side as the amount of praise that it's received. I'm talking about Rejection by Tony Tulatimuti. This is a collection of short stories. I understand the first story in this collection, which is called A Feminist, that's a satirical title, was published and widely received. And there's two ways to go when you have a well-received short story. You can either pad the whole thing out into a novel, or you can make it a short story and write more short stories in almost exactly the same vein, and that is the route that we have here. I guess they're kind of interconnected. I seem to have been reading a lot of interconnected short story things, which I don't mind. Short stories are almost impossible to sell, and I don't mind an interconnected short story. I think, the classic I've said is Olive Kittredge, but I think something like North Woods by Daniel Mason was very much interconnected short stories, even though it pitched a novel. I read Ben Shattuck's History of Sound recently. What else? Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, which I haven't reviewed here, which I read, is just interconnected short stories, and we've got the same thing here on a shared theme with some of the characters showing up in each other's stories. But do not be fooled. This is a short story collection. If you don't like short stories, you won't like this. If you don't like short stories that are all 30 pages longer than they need to be, then you definitely won't like this, because that's exactly what's going on here. It's I would say faux transgressive. What I mean by that is it's trying very hard to shock you. Maybe I'm older and harder to shock. Maybe I read Lolita. Maybe I've read other sort of transgressive auto-fiction stuff. I've read some interesting stuff recently. Eliza Clark's first novel was terrific. Elisa Nutting, who is actually blurbed on the back of this book, wrote a book called Tampa, which is genuinely transgressive. This is not genuinely transgressive. This is sort of poop-flingingly juvenile. It's just a bit, it's all about showing how clever the author is, and he writes great sentences. I want to get that clear. This is a writer who can write. It's just he chooses to write very self-involved, silly, masturbatory rubbish. So some interesting ideas and a satire on feminism and how women's greatest allies can, when they can become incels and miserable and turn on women. So that's the whole satire on the guy. He believes that he's just been the best possible friend to women he could be, and why won't they sleep with him? And he's very angry about that. So far so not terribly. And there's I think the story that really turned me. I didn't mind that opening story, and then there's another story with one of the characters in that first story, and then there's a story that starts with a character writing a painful coming out letter to his family, and deciding to live his truth as a gay man. There's a middle section where he is in a relationship, but he just can't get over his shame, which is not being placed upon him by the outside world. It is entirely self-generated, and so he finishes the last extended section of the story is the relationship breaks down, and he decides he's going to commission from a gay porn star who offers this service. He will describe exactly what video he wants this person to make, and he goes into enormous nerdy detail. It's got elements of anime and elements of all sorts of things which I am probably too old to understand, but in graphic detail about exactly what he wants to see happen to this porn star in order to get his, he's slightly sadistic, even though in real life he's much too mild and shamed and ashamed to pursue any of this. But it's enormous graphic detail about what he wants the person to think and how he wants to be penetrated and swallowed, and I mean it's endless. It just goes on and on and on. So even if the first couple of bits were sort of funny and gross and weird, it just gets sort of repetitive. And I think it's supposed to dull you into a submission. because it's going not in the slightest bit erotic, just more and more description of what he wants to see, and completely unfilmable. Even though he's giving tips all the way through how the person providing the service could potentially and feasibly film this part, and this bit you could do with a green screen, and this bit needs to be practical. All these kind of just dreadful details, and then all of this, which goes on way too long to be entertaining, then ends with just a trashiest, cheapest joke where by mistake, instead of sending it to the guy who he wants to provide the service, he sends it to the mailing list that he sent his coming out letter. So everybody in his parents, etc. Ha 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 ha. Just a terrible, weak punchline to the most interminably non-transgressive shaggy dog story about male longing. That was weak as anything. And there's this just exhaustingly drawn out writing of one of these internet spats. So that the protagonist is saying, I want to tell you what happened, this fight that went on the internet, and how it actually started, and how actually I was responsible for the whole thing. And again, easily 30, 40 pages too long. We got the joke. We got the point. This is neither interesting nor that amusing. It's just a weird subset of the internet and being a troll and being unable to accept love or even know what it is, what love is, or any kind of affection or intimacy, and just being divorced from civilization and celebrating that. It's just dreadful. But the real cherry on this Two Girls One Cupcake is the final story, which is a short thing called Rejection, where Rejection. It's an email that the author receives from the publishers explaining why they have to reject his work, Rejection. Clearly they didn't. So even that is artificial in the worst way, because I'm holding it in my hands. But this story, they go on about how, and they go through each story explaining why we can't really publish this, and this is what's wrong with this, and this one was really more about you, but you didn't reveal enough about yourself. It just really, the Ouroboros is actually swallowing its own horse shit here, and right up to the point, wait for it, where he even talks about how they reject this story about rejecting all the stories. Masturbatory nonsense. I wasn't as angry reading it as I've come to be thinking about it and wanting to talk about it. And I know sometimes shitting on a book is funnier and more entertaining to watch than being kind about a book. I think this gentleman can write. I think this is lazy, cheap, non-transgressive in the way, as Elisa Nutting wrote, a genuinely transgressive and hilarious and disturbing book that made the reader feel complicit. This is unrelatable. I don't believe the author in any of the things that he describes, especially the letter where he talks about rejection being rejected when it wasn't. So it's just so pleased with itself that leaves very little room for the reader to find pleasure. I don't think it's sophisticated in any way. It's auto fiction, as if Martin Amis before his voice dropped. I've seen it before. It's not very impressive. Ooh, sex. Not recommended. That is Rejection by Tony Tlatamamuti. God bless. Bye.